New evidence of the real big brother that's watching the world. A trove of Pentagon documents which surfaced on social media since the beginning of March is believed to provide a rare window on the depth of U.S. surveillance worldwide. The over 100-page materials appear to be security briefing slides with intelligence collected through U.S. spy operations on its foes and allies alike, including members of the Five Eye Intelligence Alliance, Israel, the Republic of Korea, and Ukraine. Some have described this leak as the largest since Edward Snowden. The Pentagon has not challenged the authenticity of the materials, and an interagency team has been set up to assess the impact of the leak. Some countries affected have denied the authenticity of the documents in apparent defense of their alliances with Washington. So how credible are the materials? What does the leak tell us about the United States, and what could be the potential consequences, especially regarding the war in Ukraine? I'm pleased to be joined from North Carolina, the U.S., by Raymond McGovern, a former CIA analyst of 27 years. Ray, it's always good to have you on the show, and thank you very much for joining us. So first of all, having read the material and related media reports, how authentic do the leaked documents look like to you, and who could possibly have leaked them?
They are authentic. We need not have wasted any time on that. Who would have leaked them? Somebody with access to the very high, top secret material, which is a small universe, and also with access to no foreign, that is, disseminated material not disseminated to foreigners. So this came from the inner sanctum of the Pentagon, it seems. Everyone is treating it as authentic. And the question is, why? Cui bono? Why would someone try to do this? And the answer I would give, you mentioned Ukraine. The Ukraine is coming to a denouement. There are going to be very, very important decisions made in Washington. And until now, the American people have not known anything about the lies that have been told. Ukraine winning, okay, the Russians losing. And this material shows that that was very much not the case. The
Yeah.
Russians are advancing.
Can you illustrate a little bit more? I mean, from what I read, obviously the casualty numbers may be one point that you're referring to. I mean, there are reports about the intelligence briefing slides showing the contrast of casualties between the two sides being different from what the Pentagon and other U.S. analysts have been estimating. The opposite, basically, what they're telling the public is that Russia has been losing, but actually on these security slides, the casualty number for the Russian side is smaller. So is that what you're talking about?
It's very low. This is one exhibit of this. Now, the other thing to say here is that just because this material is highly classified does not mean that it's correct. For example, there's one figure in there that says Russia has committed 97% of its armed forces to Ukraine. Nobody believes that who knows the real world. And yet, some high British official has repeated that. So this is a hodgepodge of serious intelligence communication, intelligence information, and a bunch of press reports. And it's not very, I'm not very proud to see what has happened to the intelligence
But
community, because if I were a policymaker, I would be totally confused. And
but
now that confusion is apparent to everyone.
so basically, you're saying these leaked documents appear authentic to you, and nobody has really challenged the content of it. But on the other hand, the quality of the intelligence that's been revealed through this document is confusing. It's actually low. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. But the main point, the one you made, is that the casualty figures are very revealing, because they're not at all the casualty figures that the Pentagon has put forth up till now.
So which one should people decide? Which one, especially, should the policymakers, use, rely on?
Well, that's just it. The policymakers will be forced now to ask these questions. Is it true that there are an equal number of Russians killed to the Ukrainian army. Of course, it's not true. Most of the ratios that I've seen are 7 to 1, 7 Ukrainians killed for every 1 Russian. I don't delight in that, but those are the facts. And what the policymakers need to know are the facts. And so far, the intelligence probably has been so corrupted and so slanted not to tell the policymakers what they don't want to hear.
Well, we also have the White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby asking the press to apparently downplay the leaks. Let's take a listen to this.
Again, without confirming the validity of the documents, this is information that has no business in the public domain. It has no business, if you don't mind me saying, on the pages of front pages of newspapers or on television. It is not intended for public consumption, and it should not be out there.
So, Ray, what do you make of Mr. Kirby asking the press not to, basically, to limit what they can write, what they should write?
Well, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, okay? It's out. The real question is why the New York Times decided, and the Washington Post, to run with the story. They could easily have suppressed it. They've suppressed many a story, and it wasn't around. It was just in these obscure websites. So this says to me that there are lots of important people who have ties with the New York Times who wanted this story out, okay? And that's why the New York Times played it. So there's a royale battle here, battle royale within the policymakers as what to do now that we know the Ukrainians are not winning and that the Russians could go as far as the Dnieper River. And what do we do then? The time to plan that is now. Somebody release this information, in my view, to force the policymakers and the American people not to be surprised when serious decisions have to be made on the basis of real evidence, not concocted figures such as we've seen so far.
So on the other point, which many countries have complained, is the fact that the U.S. is spying on them, and they, whether they truly believed in that or not, they thought that the U.S. should not be eavesdropping on them because they are allies. For instance, we have seen reports about Israel's Mossad's being target of the spy operation, and the South Koreans are being overheard on how they can skirt around their domestic laws to comply with U.S. demand to supply weapons to Ukraine. What do you make of the United States' behavior of eavesdropping on their allies consistently, basically, despite repeated complaints from its allies?
Well, for an intelligence operator, there's no such thing as a friendly ally. There's no such thing as a country against whom you will not collect information, okay? There's no friendly intelligence service. So this will come as no surprise, especially to Mossad. South Koreans, well, that's different. This has to do with very sensitive electronic information, which is actually forbidden by another law in the United States. They won't like to hear that, but, they will not be all that surprised. And their reaction so far has been quite muted.
So one thing that we picked up from the media reports, for instance, is the signals intelligence. Can you help us understand a little bit more, Ray, what the signals intelligence is all about? And, the United States, of course, is spying on everybody, but what are some of the restrictions? Are there any restrictions?
None for the CIA. There are certain restrictions for the National Security Agency not to collect such information on American citizens in the United States, but otherwise no prohibitions. So everything from cell phones to very sophisticated intercepts of satellite communications, that all qualifies as signals intelligence. And as I just mentioned, this is very serious because there is a separate statute that forbids the release of this, and you can go to jail for a very long time if you violate that statute.
Okay. We can talk to Professor Rick Dunham, who is co-director of the Global Business Journalism Program at Tsinghua University. Rick, thank you very much for joining us. So what is your take on on what the the leaked Pentagon documents are telling us about the United States and how it's operating in terms of intelligence operations vis-a-vis its allies, especially?
Well, I think it's telling us two things. One is that the United States continues to gather intelligence on allies and foes alike, and that ranges from Israel to Egypt to Western European allies and Ukraine. But it also tells us the United States has really made inroads in Russian intelligence, in breaking through the Russian system to figure out whether it's human or signal intelligence, what's going on in the Kremlin. But yes, it tells us that the same kinds of things that were happening in the first decade of the 20th century are continuing to happen. United States spying on allies, United States continuing to monitor conversations of leaders of friendly nations.
So what do you make of the materials that people have been able to see in the leaked documents? For instance, I was just talking to Raymond McGovern, a former CIA analyst, about the quality of the intelligence that's being briefed to U.S. top policymakers, and Ray obviously caused the quality to be very low. What is your assessment of the kind of information that's being fed to the top policy circles?
Correct. I would agree with him from the sort of the grading of intelligence by intelligence professionals. But as a former journalist, as someone who covered the White House and has seen a lot of leaks in the past, it's very embarrassing. It's low quality in that this was basically carried out of the Pentagon probably by a staffer in his or her pocket and then photographed. Crumpled up pieces of paper that were then photographed. But the other question about quality is that yes, it was out there in the gaming platform in the chat room, but what was released to the media and on social media may have been doctored and may have been doctored by a country not friendly to the United States, such as Russia, because we don't know if the information contained in what was leaked to the social media is doctored documents. They may have been real documents at one point, but have the numbers been changed? The Biden administration has noted that the casualties for Russia have been lowered than what was on the authentic documents. At least they believe so. So we don't know if this information that's been released to the public is authentic. The original documents appear to be authentic, but we don't know if it has been changed and altered.
By and large, overall, what do you think does this incident tell the U.S. allies, especially foes, of course, be more extra vigilant, but what does it tell to the U.S.'s allies, and what can be the consequences for real battles, such as the one in Ukraine?
I think that what it tells the allies is the United States is sort of always the big brother in the relationship, and it's telling us that Big Brother's watching you, that at any time the United States has capability and probably does collect the intelligence, whether or not it's used against them. What it means in Ukraine is that Ukraine is going to have to change some of its strategies. Apparently, some of the Ukrainian air defenses have been released to the world, and so yes, they're going to have to change strategies for their spring offensive if they want to be safe.
Raymond, finally coming back to you, what kind of measures do you think the United States is going to take to go an extra mile to protect its intelligence, and what could be the consequence of such leaks if more document is coming? Keep it short, please.
They'll be very careful who goes into these compartmented rooms and who comes out. The real significance of this, of course, is cui bono, who profits from the release of this information. This is a bombshell. It will lead to a reassessment of U.S. policy in Ukraine. That is big. It couldn't be bigger.
All right, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to Raymond McGovern, former CIA analyst, and Professor Dunham, co-director of the Global Business Journalism Program at Tsinghua University. Thank you very much. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, a Swiss scholar said the U.S. cannot have the hegemonic power anymore. Why does he say that? Stay with us.